It was a quiet Tuesday when the dog walked into Station 14. No sirens, no flames, just the usual late afternoon lull, half the crew in the kitchen arguing over how long leftovers could survive in a fridge before mutating into a lawsuit, and the other half lounging near the bay door, watching traffic drift by, pretending they weren't waiting for something to break. Then the dog appeared, not through the side gate or the rear alley. He came straight through the main entrance, as if he'd been there before, as if he knew the way. A golden retriever, medium build, soaked and shaking, but not with fear. Mud caked up his legs, fur clumped into thick tangles. His paws bled with each step, and in his mouth, dangling like an accusation, was a small white sneaker. Bloodied, child-sized. He didn't bark, he didn't whine. He simply stepped onto the concrete, paused in the center of the station, and stared. Everything stopped. Conversations died in throats. A half-eaten sandwich slipped from someone's hand. The silence in the room wasn't just confusion, it was dread. One of those moments where every part of your body knows something is wrong before your mind catches up. Lieutenant Harris stood from his desk in the back, his coffee still steaming on the edge. He looked at the dog, and the dog looked back. Not pleading, not panicked, just certain, like he had seen too much to waste time explaining. "Get a kit," Harris said, his voice low, "and water. Now." The dog didn't resist. When someone approached with a bowl, he drank without hesitation. When they reached for the shoe, he placed it gently on the ground and sat beside it, not guarding it, offering it. Harris crouched beside the bloody sneaker. The rubber sole was frayed. There was something smeared on the inner heel. Not dirt. Something thicker, metallic. Blood. He didn't touch it. Instead, he looked at the dog again. "No collar," he muttered. "No tag, no chip." The rookie medic scanned the retriever's neck and shook his head. "Where the hell did you come from?" someone whispered from the doorway. No one answered. The silence thickened. The dispatcher confirmed. No active calls, no reports of missing kids, no recent animal alerts. But something about the shoe, the weight of it, the way the blood had dried, sent a chill up Harris's spine. He'd seen that kind of silence before. 15 years ago. Same town, same station, different shift, a house fire out by the woods, 2 kids inside. They pulled one out. The other, they didn't. Harris was new then, still green, still the guy who asked, "Why didn't we get there faster?" Nobody ever answered that question either. The dog stood, no command, no gesture, just stood, turned toward the bay doors and walked, and then stopped, turned his head, waited, like he was saying, "Are you coming or not?" Harris didn't think. He just moved, past the trucks, past the gear, through the open doors and out into the heat. A voice called after him, but he ignored it. The dog led, through the back road, down an alley thick with weeds, across the ditch behind the old baseball field. Harris's boots filled with mud, mosquitoes rose in clouds, but the dog never slowed. He wasn't wandering, he was retracing something. They crossed into a patch of woods where the trees grew close and the light thinned. Harris swatted at low branches, feeling that pulse in his neck again, the one that always came before a discovery you didn't want to make. And then he saw it. A house, or what was left of it, half collapsed. Roof caved in, windows gone, ivy climbing through the broken siding like fingers reaching in. A mailbox still stood near the gate, rusted shut. The nameplate had faded to nothing. But Harris knew it. Every cracked brick, every nail. Because he'd stood there once, 15 years ago. Same smell of moss and ash, same wind in the trees. He hadn't been back since. The dog walked up to the front steps, or what remained of them, and sat. He looked at Harris, not expectantly, not accusingly, just waiting. Harris stood at the edge of what used to be the porch, boots sinking into mud, softened by time and rot. He hadn't been here in 15 years, but his body remembered every step like muscle memory. The last time he stood on this exact ground, The fire had already gutted the place. Smoke thick in his lungs, the roof caving. The girl screaming from somewhere they never reached. He never told anyone, but the guilt had never faded. It just got quieter. Until now. The golden retriever sat perfectly still at the top of the broken stairs. He didn't move, didn't pant. His gaze never left Harris. Not urging, not hopeful, just still. "Why here?" Harris muttered. There was no answer, only the creak of wind in the hollow frame of the house. He stepped over the threshold, careful not to disturb what little structure remained. Vines coiled through the splintered floorboards. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. Dust and mildew mixed with the faintest trace of something else, something familiar. Not smoke, not rot, cinnamon. He stopped. That scent. He hadn't thought of it in over a decade, but there it was. That little girl, Rachel. She wore a red jacket with cinnamon gum in the pocket. He remembered the taste when they carried her brother out and found it stuck to his hand. She was the one they didn't find, the one who was probably never even in the house, they told him, the one the mother insisted was at daycare. But Harris never forgot the sound, that scream, sharp, high, swallowed by fire. In the center of the ruined room, something caught his eye. A backpack, pink, faded, covered in soot. The zipper was twisted, one strap half melted, but it had survived, somehow untouched by weather or time. He knelt slowly, heart pounding in his ears. He didn't need to open it. He knew whose it was. She had been here all these years, and no one had searched this deep. They'd cleared the front room, the kitchen, found nothing, and moved on. But she had been here, and now this dog had brought him back. Why? He turned toward the retriever. The dog didn't look away. "What do you want from me?" Harris asked, his voice hoarse. Still nothing. Only that stare, heavy with something he couldn't name. He picked up the backpack and turned it over. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a photograph, water-damaged, but clear enough. A girl with a crooked grin, red jacket, holding a golden retriever puppy. Harris stumbled back. It wasn't just any dog. It was this dog, older now, grayed around the eyes, but unmistakably the same, Rachel's dog. His breath caught. The fire, the loss, the unanswered questions, all of it dragged back into daylight by a retriever who had been waiting. For what? For someone to remember? He sank to the floor, the backpack on his lap. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a reckoning. And the dog had walked all those miles, bleeding and broken, not for help, but for closure. Back at the station, the others had started to worry. Calls had gone out, radios chirped with static, but Harris didn't move, not yet. He looked up at the dog and whispered, "You waited all this time." And for the first time since he arrived, the dog shifted, slowly, softly. He stepped forward, laid his head on Harris's knee, and closed his eyes. It wasn't affection, it wasn't forgiveness, it was a goodbye. The sound of voices came long before the people did. Crackling radios, footsteps on wet earth, flashlights swinging like pendulums through the trees. Harris didn't move. He sat inside the ruined house, cross-legged on a floor that had once been kitchen tile, the pink backpack in his lap, the golden retriever curled beside him like a relic of something too sacred to name. "Lieutenant Harris!" someone called out. He didn't answer. The dog didn't stir. When the crew finally stepped through the threshold, they hesitated, not because of danger, the building was already a skeleton, but because the air inside was thick. It pressed down, like the house still held its last breath. One firefighter took a step in and froze. Another muttered, "What is this place?" Harris looked up, his voice quiet but sharp. "This is the place we gave up on." He stood slowly, knees stiff, and handed over the backpack like it was a living thing. Not evidence, testimony. The younger officer who took it didn't know what to say. Most didn't. They filed out in silence. By nightfall, the lot was flooded. Police, crime scene vans, tripods and floodlights. A news crew parked just past the fence line, already live. The tape went up, cameras rolled, reporters smiled somberly into their microphones, announcing, "A breakthrough in a decades-old missing child case, all thanks to one brave dog." Some even called it a miracle. The detective from Cold Cases showed up with a folder so thin it looked like it had been forgotten in a drawer. Rachel's name was written on it in faded pen. A single page. Age 7. Last seen wearing a red jacket. Presumed dead. Case inactive. Until now. They snapped pictures of the dog. Someone patted Harris on the shoulder. "You did good, sir. Real good." He didn't reply, just watched the golden retriever sit quietly near the porch, eyes half closed, tail still. He didn't react to the cameras, didn't flinch when the flashbulbs went off. He just sat, not as a hero, but as someone who had waited too long to feel anything but tired. The headlines exploded by morning. Hero dog solves mystery. Golden retriever uncovers child's fate. Lost for years, found by loyalty. The internet devoured it. Videos looped endlessly. Comments poured in. Hearts, crying emojis, declarations of love for the smartest dog alive. People demanded interviews. TV anchors smiled as they told the story, with cheerful music playing underneath. But none of them asked the real questions. Where had the dog been all these years? Who fed him? Why had he come back now? Had he waited by that ruin year after year? Had he gone looking on his own when no one else did? No one asked what it meant to stay behind when the world had already moved on. Harris did. He knew. Because he too had stayed. Not physically. He left the scene all those years ago like everyone else. But part of him had been trapped there ever since. Every fire, every late call, every child screaming behind drywall. He carried it. The guilt, the failure, the silence. And this dog? He had carried something heavier. Loss. Real, unfiltered, never explained loss. And he hadn't barked or broken or begged. He had waited for someone to come, for someone to care. That night, long after the others had gone home and the reporters had packed up, Harris sat in the empty bay of the station. The golden retriever lay beside him on an old towel, paws tucked under, head resting on his side. Harris placed a bowl of water nearby, untouched. "You did more than any of us ever did," he said softly. The dog didn't lift his head, but his tail moved, once gently, like an answer. Harris leaned back against the wall, eyes on the ceiling. "You're not a miracle," he said. "You're a memory, and that's why they'll forget you again." No reaction, just the slow, steady rhythm of the dog's breathing. But Harris knew. He'd remember. Because sometimes it's not the rescue that defines you, it's the refusal to leave. They gave him an award. 2, actually. One for Harris and one for the dog. The city council stood in front of the courthouse with ribbons, claps, and cameras. The mayor read a prepared speech. They called it a testament to the enduring bond between man and animal. Someone printed it on mugs by the next day. The dog didn't go. Harris didn't either. He was back at Station 14, sitting in the quiet bay with a cup of cold coffee, watching the sun crawl across the concrete. The 2 plaques, polished, engraved, gift-wrapped in velvet boxes, sat untouched in his locker. What he had done wasn't brave. What the dog had done wasn't heroic. They had just stayed. A few days later, the dog collapsed. Not dramatically, just a quiet folding of legs in the yard behind Harris's house. He didn't whine, didn't try to rise, just stared forward, chest barely rising. Harris rushed him to the vet. The scan results were sobering. Heart strain, liver degeneration, internal bleeding likely from long-term untreated injuries. Whatever had kept the dog moving all these years was starting to run out. They offered to euthanize. Harris shook his head. Not yet. He cleared out the guest room, covered the hardwood floor with blankets and pillows, set up a fan, a heater, water bowls, wet food. He carried the dog in gently, laying him down like glass, and every night he slept beside him, sometimes reading, sometimes listening to old fire calls he kept on tape, sometimes just breathing in rhythm. The dog barely moved now. But when Harris would wake from his own haunted dreams, he'd find the retriever's eyes open, watching him, still alert, still present. It broke something in him, not with violence, but with quiet mercy. This dog, who had waited so long for someone to return, now watched over the man who'd once left. Some nights, Harris whispered aloud, things he'd never told anyone, things he should have said in therapy, things he wasn't proud of. I froze that night. I didn't believe the girl was inside. I walked away before the second sweep. The dog blinked slowly, never judged, never moved, just listened. That's what he'd done all along. So Harris began to build, not a monument, not a tomb, something different, a structure, a place. With wood he salvaged from the old firehouse remodel, brick by brick, nail by nail. He built it in the grove near the clearing where the house used to stand, not as a replica, but as an echo. It was crooked, open to the wind, a roof that bowed in the middle, windows with no glass, a bench made of splintered cedar where no one would expect comfort, and yet feel it anyway. Inside, he placed 3 things: a faded pink backpack, a child's white sneaker, washed and clean, and a framed photo of the dog sitting in Station 14, holding that same shoe in his mouth. Above the bench, Harris carved into the wall with his own pocket knife. Some of us don't leave, some of us wait, some of us are never found, but never forgotten. No media came, no politicians, only the wind, and yet people began arriving, quietly, one by one. First, an old man who sat without speaking for 3 hours, then left a small tin soldier on the bench. Then a woman who brought a child and pointed to the wall, whispering, "This is where they listen." Then came teenagers, firefighters off duty, a priest, a paramedic who cried into his own collar. They left trinkets, notes, shoelaces, pieces of themselves. And the dog? He greeted none of them, but he remained at the edge of the grove, resting under the twisted oak, watching. Not as a guardian, as a witness. By the 2nd month, his body began to shut down. He stopped rising altogether. Harris hand-fed him soft food, carried him out to the sun each day, not to walk, just to feel warmth again. The dog didn't resist. He didn't seem afraid, only tired, but his eyes never left Harris, as if to say, "You came back, that's enough." And Harris finally understood. He hadn't rebuilt the house to fix what happened. He had rebuilt it so the story wouldn't disappear again. So someone, anyone, would know that this wasn't just a fire call gone wrong. It was a silence that had lived too long, a silence that had grown legs and fur and waited 15 years to be heard. And when that place was done, the dog didn't get up again. No one saw him leave. There was no cry, no heavy breath, no silent farewell under a blanket of stars, just moments stitched together like any other evening, until it wasn't. The golden retriever had been resting beneath the oak tree, his body calm, eyes half closed, while Harris prepared his food inside. The light was fading, wind shifting gently through the clearing. When Harris returned, the dog was no longer there. No paw prints in the softened dirt, no broken branches, no trail to follow. The blanket still lay undisturbed, the water bowl full, untouched. It was as if the air itself had carried him away, without a trace, without sound, and without pain. At first, Harris felt a flicker of fear, the same kind that rises when you realize something precious has slipped through your fingers. But this wasn't fear, not truly. It was recognition, the kind that doesn't ask questions, because deep down, the answer has already arrived. He searched the grove out of habit, not hope, checked the edges of the park, called out once, quietly. The wind answered, nothing more. There was no dread, no panic, only stillness. The kind of stillness that signals not a loss, but a choice. And in that silence, Harris understood. The dog had not died. He had simply moved on. not from neglect and certainly not from lack of love, but because what he came to do was done. The weight had been passed, the silence broken, the memory uncovered. The boy, now a man, had returned, and so the dog, whatever he truly was, left, carrying with him only the quiet knowing that his part was finished. Harris didn't share what happened. There was no announcement, no story to tell. When people visited the crooked house and asked, "Where is he?" he would smile without sadness and say, "Somewhere else now." It became a ritual, a truth that didn't require proof. Visitors accepted it. They didn't come to grieve, but to understand something they hadn't yet named, to sit beside the bench in silence, to look at the photograph still pinned to the wall, the dog holding that tiny, blood-stained shoe in his mouth like a message the world had finally heard. Weeks passed, then months. The crooked house remained open to the wind, weathered but strong. The bench grew worn, the words carved into the beam above faded slightly under rain. Still, people arrived. Some came to leave behind tokens, drawings, trinkets, folded letters without names. Others came just to sit, not because they knew the full story, but because something in the place made them feel seen, not by a person, but by presence itself. One late autumn morning, Harris found something new tacked beside the original photo. A small image, slightly damp, edges curling. A different golden retriever sat on the steps of what looked like a church, eyes the same, posture the same. A different shoe hung from his mouth. A child's sandal this time, no note, no explanation, only a red pushpin holding it in place. Harris studied it quietly, not surprised, not confused, just still. He didn't ask who left it. He didn't try to find out. Instead, he added a new nail beside it and made space for more. Because over the next few seasons, more photos arrived. One from a schoolyard, one from the steps of a hospital, one from the gravel road behind a homeless shelter. In every photo, a retriever sat with something small in his mouth, something lost, forgotten, or left behind. Always waiting, always watching. And in the corner of each image, scrawled in pen or etched in the background, 5 simple words: for the one who waited. Harris never tried to explain it. He only made room on the wall. Eventually, no one called it a memorial anymore. It wasn't about loss, it was about return, about the quiet bond between those who wait and those who finally come back. It became something else entirely, not a place to grieve, but a place to start again. Sometimes Harris would walk to the grove alone, sit where the dog once lay beneath the oak tree, clover now thick around the roots. He'd rest a hand on the ground, close his eyes, and listen. Not for a bark, not for steps, but for the space that had been left behind and how it still held him, quietly. The dog had not stayed. He had simply known when it was time to go. If this story found you, share it with someone who waited for you when no one else did. Not all goodbyes are meant to be heard. Some are meant to be felt and remembered.